Music hits us right in the heart, doesn't it? A song comes on and, well, instantly your mood can shift.
Yeah, totally.
But what if, as these sources suggest, some of that power isn't just about rhythm and melody? What if there's a claim that some artists have connections to something much darker and are deliberately, wielding that influence?
That's certainly a striking and challenging idea right at the start of the material we have for this deep dive.
Mm.
We've been given a collection of sources by a listener, and they include insights from several Catholic priests, getting into some pretty unexpected and, frankly, quite unsettling topics.
Absolutely. We're going to unpack a whole range of ideas here, from the spiritual impact of music and, well, alleged glimpses into these deeply hidden cults,
Right.
to some surprising theological questions and even practical advice on, personal spiritual practices.
Our mission today, really, is to explore the most important nuggets of knowledge and insight presented in these sources. We're here to guide you through what they suggest about, well, the unseen forces and spiritual realities discussed within them. Let's dive in.
Okay, let's unpack this first key area, the incredible power music holds. This material really emphasizes how music goes straight to the heart, directly affecting emotions.
Yeah.
It can draw you closer to God, or depending on its content and maybe its alleged underlying intention, pull you away. It's not just background noise. It's described here as a potent spiritual force.
And what's fascinating, or maybe disturbing, is the specific historical claim we find here about how that power was allegedly manipulated. There's this story about certain heavy metal and rock bands back in the 70s and 80s,
Right.
reportedly consecrating their albums to the devil.
And one account in the material includes a truly vivid detail, this former wealthy real estate agent, someone apparently with insider connections, who reportedly attended several black masses held by these bands before an album release, specifically with the alleged intention of sending demons to attach themselves to everyone who bought it.
Wow. That's a heavy claim about hidden practices.
Yeah.
But the sources suggest there's been a shift.
A shift how?
Well, they claim artists today aren't really hiding this kind of influence anymore. They specifically mention examples like Taylor Swift and Katy Perry,
Yeah.
saying their concerts and videos give the impression of them being heavily into witchcraft, the occult, sorcery, that kind of thing.
So why would artists allegedly do this? What's the motivation suggested in the sources?
Well, the idea presented is that the pursuit of, immense power and money can lead artists deeper into what's called a debt to the devil, sort of compelling them to do his bidding.
And that bidding is supposedly reflected in the content itself.
Exactly. Described as risque, immodest, sexual, promoted the capital sins. Just for clarity, the sources are pointing to those root vices like pride, greed, lust, anger, envy, gluttony, sloth, the ones.
Right, right. This raises a critical point about the impact, particularly on young people. The sources focus specifically on, 15-year-olds, noting they find this kind of content exciting and are drawn to imitate these artists, thinking it makes them cool.
And here's where it gets really serious, according to these accounts. The severe consequences described for these young people include, inviting demonic influence into their lives.
That sounds extreme.
It does.
Yeah.
And the sources claim that by age 18, many of them are suffering from severe depression and experiencing suicidal thoughts.
And the concern expressed in the material is that parents often miss what's presented as the obvious cause, what these young people are absorbing, what they are feeding on through their eyes and ears from this music and visual media.
Yeah. So the core insight from this part of the sources seems to be this claim that music isn't neutral. It's viewed as a potent spiritual force that artists might deliberately wield for dark purposes, with potentially severe consequences for listeners, especially the young.
Okay, so building on that idea of external negative influences, the sources also get into a really challenging area, alleged organized satanic cults.
Right. These are described as ancient cults, suggesting they're very old, spanning, many generations.
What stands out immediately is the distinction made here. These aren't like cults you might read about trying to recruit new members.
No. The sources claim they aren't interested in converting anyone or having you join them.
Instead, there's this chilling claim that they breed their own members
Yeah.
with births that are completely unregistered.
This has profound implications, obviously. Because these children are born without any official records, they essentially don't exist in the eyes of the law.
Right.
The sources detail that these groups often live in rural areas. If neighbors see unregistered children, they might just assume they're homeschooled, unaware they have no legal existence.
And the disturbing dual purpose described for raising these children, it's
Yeah, it's twofold, according to the claims. One, to perpetuate the cult itself, and two, allegedly to provide victims for sacrifices.
That's horrific. And there's a particularly grim detail mentioned, a connection to child pornography as a source of income.
Yes. The sources make the horrific claim that while authorities might discover caches of this material and arrest consumers,
Mm-hmm.
they never find the child actors involved.
Why not?
Because, according to these accounts, by the time the material is released, those actors don't exist any longer. That's a truly disturbing claim presented here.
Wow. Insights are also shared about escapees from these cults. How hard is it?
Extremely difficult, apparently. Described as breaking free by the skin of their teeth, with the cults reportedly using every resource to try and recapture them.
And one significant reason escapees live under assumed identities is because they have no registered IDs or birth certificates. They never had them.
Exactly. The sources note that some never even experience being known by just one name, having been called by multiple names throughout their horrific upbringing.
The lasting impact, it must be immense.
Oh, heavily emphasized. They can never truly live what's considered a normal life due to their experiences.
And Father Martin's, one of the priests cited, he makes a specific point about this.
He does. He apparently validates the existence of these cults through his own witness
Yeah.
and even personal retaliation he's faced. He wants to separate this reality from, discussions about cult phobia that might have happened in the past, like the 80s.
Okay. So this section paints a deeply dark picture of alleged hidden structures of evil operating with extreme secrecy and causing unimaginable harm.
Yeah, it's very heavy material.
All right, shifting gears quite dramatically now.
Yeah.
The sources also delve into some unexpected and fascinating theological questions.
Right. A bit of a change of pace.
One question raised is whether Christ would have come to earth even if Adam and Eve had not sinned.
Interesting. What's the premise for that?
Well, as explained in the material, the idea is that there is already evil and rebellion in the spiritual realm. Angelic souls were already going to hell.
Yeah.
And everyone, whether human or angelic, needs an individual test for merit and glory.
Got it. So the answer given in these sources is?
Yes. Jesus would have come, reigning in the flesh, even if humanity hadn't fallen into sin.
Huh. Okay. But here's where the discussion gets debated within the material, right?
Exactly. Would he have come through Mary or without a human person involved?
And Father Yanni, another priest whose perspective is shared, he offers his theological opinion, stressing it's speculative, not official church teaching.
Right. Important caveat.
He believes Christ would not have come without a human being involved, and specifically would have come through Mary, because he needed to receive his humanity from a human source.
He mentions church fathers speaking of Mary being chosen from eternity.
Yeah, and he sees Christ's eventual return with angels and saints as sort of a fruit of his coming through Mary in the first place.
Okay, interesting. Another theological question explored. Does Christ experience pain if the Eucharist is deliberately trampled or bitten?
Oof. Where did that question come from?
Apparently from a seminarian, wondering why Christ would invite us to eat him if it caused him pain. A fair question, I suppose.
Yeah, makes sense. And the answer presented reportedly learned from universities in Rome.
It's clear. No physical pain experienced by Christ when the consecrated host is consumed or, sacrilegiously stepped on.
Okay, no physical pain.
Right.
But what is experienced?
Sorrow. But crucially, only if the intention behind the action is specifically to hurt him, to offend him.
Ah, so intent matters.
Exactly. If the intention is assimilation, the very reason Christ chose this way for us to receive him, to unite us to himself, then he experiences love and joy.
Okay. The sources introduce a theological concept here, right? Impassibility.
Yes, impassibility. It's described as a characteristic of the blessed in heaven being immune from physical pain.
But they clarify that sorrow is still possible.
Right. They even cite Revelation chapter 6, verse 9, where saints are depicted expressing sorrow, suggesting that heaven isn't only smiles, deep feeling is still present.
So these theological insights, while maybe a bit abstract, they really highlight the depth of spiritual reality sources are exploring.
Definitely. And the specific questions arising from faith.
Given all these claims about external influences and unseen realities, it's perhaps not surprising that the sources then turn to discuss, practical ways individuals can fortify themselves spiritually.
Yeah, they offer some very practical reflections on personal spiritual practices.
One point highlights just how comfortable many of us are, especially in first world countries. Even with a modest income, say $40K a year, and hot running water.
Which many people have.
Right. You could potentially be in the global top 1% in terms of material comfort. Yet, we often compare ourselves only to the super rich, right? Missing our relative richness.
Yeah, perspective is key.
And this leads to the observation that our comfortable culture can be soft, sort of averse to suffering. And this is where the sources emphasize the importance of self-imposed penances.
Okay, penances. What's the danger they point out if we don't do them?
The danger is that when life is too easy, too comfortable, lacking boundaries, the body can start dictating terms to the soul.
Making it harder to resist temptation.
Exactly. The purpose of penances, as described, is to build spiritual muscles, to strengthen the soul's ability to tell the body no,
Oh,
which
right.
gets the body used to taking commands,
Yeah.
making it easier to resist cravings, like lust, for example. An example given is fasting on bread and water 2 days a week.
That's a serious penance.
It is. But it teaches the body he can go without and still be okay, that it's not in charge. The soul is.
Okay. Another practice discussed is divine seeing, or visio divina.
Yeah. Hanging a sacred image, like a crucifix, is described as a prayer in itself, a constant symbolic devotion.
But it's more than just having it there, right?
Crucially, the sources state that looking at a sacred image, especially when you're facing temptation, is described as being exorcistic.
Exorcistic. How so?
It effectively invokes your need for God's help and the intercession of the saint depicted. Merely having the image present is a prayer, but actively looking at it in moments of need is presented as an additional powerful prayer.
And these sacred images, they help lift the spirit and mind towards God.
That's the idea. They also touch on loving yourself, drawing on reported revelations from St. Catherine of Siena.
Loving yourself. How is that defined here? It's not egotism.
Not at all. God the Father reportedly states that your first neighbor is yourself, and you must love yourself in this specific way before you can truly love your actual neighbor.
And this way is...
As described in the sources, it's a high state of alert and attentiveness to avoid offending God who gave you your body and soul.
Okay, so seeing yourself as a temple of the Holy Spirit.
Exactly. Destined for resurrection, containing the seed of eternal life. Loving yourself in this way, safeguarding that dignity, reportedly disposes you to then be able to love imperfect others with true charity.
That's a different take on self-love. Very practical, too, is the reflection on living in awareness of Jesus' presence.
Yeah, the suggested test is simple, but quite powerful. Imagine Jesus and Mary were physically sitting with you, right there.
Okay.
Would you still do certain activities if they were right there? Watch that particular movie, buy that specific board game, go into, say, a Harry Potter shop.
The sources suggest this mental test instantly clarifies your conscience about whether an activity aligns with their presence.
Pretty much. And this heightened awareness is said to change daily behavior. You might not hit snooze. You'd get up.
Right.
You might pray for someone who cuts you off in traffic instead of getting angry. You might choose a different evening activity, like watching a faith-based show, maybe, if you were sitting beside you.
The point being, he is always with you, seen or unseen.
Exactly. But increasing your awareness of his presence, according to the sources, can change everything about how you live your day.
So these sources really drive home the idea that in a world of unseen spiritual forces, individual spiritual discipline and awareness are, well, crucial.
Definitely seems to be the message.
Finally, the sources include some truly startling anecdotes of alleged spiritual encounters. These add a kind of lived experience dimension to the claims. There's the story of the intelligent attorney.
Yes, this account describes her, an atheist, apparently seeing figurines move in her apartment.
Okay.
She reportedly gave the first permission by verbally asking if something was there, asking it to hold her hand.
Oh, dear.
Then, tragically, she gave a second permission by inviting whatever it was into bed with her.
And the result?
By night 3, according to the account, she was being raped. Father Rehill, one of the priests cited, reportedly commented that this is a very stupid thing to do, attributing it to her lack of faith and understanding of the demonic.
Wow, that's intense. There's also a detailed ghost story in a church.
Yeah, involving a pest control worker. He was servicing an old church built way back in the late 1800s.
What happened?
In the basement, coming from an old coal or archive room. He reportedly saw a misty, robed apparition walk towards the stairs, then turn down a hallway.
How did he react?
It scared him so intensely he took his breath away. He had to grab the railing just to stay standing. Intense fear.
Did anyone else experience anything?
Apparently, yes. He later learned the church receptionist had her own separate experience, hearing loud, fading fire and brimstone preaching coming from the old sanctuary upstairs.
And the pastor's response in the account? Did he dismiss it?
No, actually, it sounds like he was validating. He reportedly believes spirits can be present in churches and suggested that if we could constantly see the spiritual realm, we'd, die of fright.
Mm.
He felt the worker just got a brief glimpse, and the intense feeling was shock from the unexpected, not necessarily that the spirit itself was evil.
Did the worker see it again?
Yes, about a year later, same basement hallway. He reportedly saw a softball-sized ball of light appear on a glass pane at the end of the hall, which then manifested into the same apparition again.
Oh, wow. His reaction.
Described as a desperate, no, 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 not today, shaking violently, needing to leave the basement immediately to regain composure.
But he went back.
Yeah, he returned later to finish his work. And he serviced the church for several more years, reportedly never saw it again after that second time.
Okay. And one final unsettling anecdote about a priest.
Right. A priest appearing visibly angry during Mass. Parishioners reportedly witnessed him seeming angry during his message.
Uh-oh.
And then, after elevating the host, allegedly tossing the Eucharist into the paten, that's the small plate, which understandably shocked the family witnessing it.
What was Father Rehill's reaction to hearing about that?
As presented in the source material, his reaction was that such a priest should take a leave of absence. Figure out what spiritual or personal issue was causing that kind of behavior.
Right. These anecdotes really drive home the potential reality and proximity of the spiritual realm as perceived by these sources and the individuals they cite.
Yeah, they certainly add another layer. We've definitely covered an incredible breadth of ground in this deep dive, drawing directly from that collection of sources shared by the listener.
For sure. From the alleged power of music and hidden darkness to challenging theological considerations and surprisingly practical advice on everyday spiritual discipline.
These sources, largely from the perspectives of Catholic priests and individuals whose experiences they relay, touch upon realities that are often unseen or, unacknowledged in mainstream culture, but which they suggest have significant and sometimes startling impact on our lives and the world around us.
And all this information has been for you, the listener, to process. It's intended to give you clear insights from these specific sources and hopefully prompt your own reflections and perhaps questions.
Exactly. And perhaps the key takeaway, the final provocative thought stemming from this material is something like this. If we take seriously the possibility that these spiritual realities exist and are active, how might living with a greater, more conscious awareness of the presence of the divine or the potential for other, less benevolent influences fundamentally change how you approach your daily choices and interactions?
It's a powerful question to consider, isn't it? Based on everything we've explored today from these sources.